Everyone to our discussion on world peace, and our guest is Dr. Peter Carter. And Dr. Carter made a comment that war is revolting. And he also discussed the effect on children. And so, Raj, could you tell us your little story about Syria? Because I'd like everyone to hear what you were just saying and the impact of the media actually showing what is happening, not just about talking about the boom boom, but what it's doing to the physical bodies and so on. So please take it away.
Thank you. I have seen around 2014 or 15 when Syria war was going on. So I have seen one clip and I was very horrified for 1 week. One children, he was around 10 or 12-year-old and he hospitalized. When he opened his eyes, then he shouted and crying like a hell because he lost his legs and hands and he saw in the mirror. Then I realized that kind of trauma, oh my God, if this will be happen with me, I was also same person. So this is really, really unacceptable and I cannot forget this kind of moment. And then I realized, oh my God, war is really dangerous. So many innocent people, especially children, they are suffering, and women's and children suffering a lot, especially.
Mm. And Dr. Carter, you were telling a story about how maybe the Vietnam War was stopped because the media was showing images like what Raj is talking about, children with no hands and feet and legs and so on. And, and, excuse me, I think it would be really good if the media actually told the real story. What is really happening on the streets of Ukraine, and what is really happening in Syria, and what is happening to the minds of the parents of the soldiers from Ukraine who have died, who have given their lives in Russia. Like this war is just it's an awful, awful thing. It is revolting. So maybe you're right. Maybe what the solution is that the media and people in general need to realize that this war is causing unprecedented, and war in general and climate change, everything that's going on is causing unprecedented damage to our youth. What are they thinking? They would have incredible fears about their lives. I mean, why do they want to live on a planet that's burning up, that has no birds, that has no animals? It's horrifying to me that we've lost, our hearts are closed, Dr. Carter. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you always hear from the indigenous people in Canada, the First Nations, is they talk about talking with their head and their heart, right? And we don't seem to have a way of talking and communicating apart from our head. We tend not to be very good at bringing our heart into it, particularly men. Now, I think Raj mentioned that terrible effects on children, but also he mentioned on women, right? And as a man, I must own up to this. War is very much a male dominated and male occupied evil. It's very, very male, right? Armies, air forces, right? It's all men, right? And then we see in Ukraine, the response to the invasion is that the women and children, leave the country in their millions. and the men are left to every hour, every day, to be trying to kill other people, right? Because that's what's happening. I We were talking about how the warmongers, the war machine, the war culture, um, tends to protect us in a way from not seeing the brutal, bloody reality of war, and that doesn't help at all. War desensitizes us enough as it is.
Yes.
Without the countries and the leaders and the corporations that make the armaments, without those countries making sure, right, we never really see how bad it is, as Raj saw, before his very eyes. And it's going to be very difficult to solve the war problem, if I can put it like that, and to have a world at peace and not a world always at war or preparing for war. So our nation states, our countries, Canada, is just the same. If we're not at war, we're preparing for war. And the amount of money that's being poured into the Ukraine war to keep the war going is absolutely huge. The There's some statistics on military statistics, and Ukraine's military budget increased sixfold, right? Where will it get that money from? It will have borrowed it from the banks. We all know the vast amount of money that, particularly the United States, but also every NATO country, including Canada, have rushed to put more money into the war in Ukraine. What's happening to stop the war? What's happening to create the peace? What's happening to make peace? I'm not aware of anything.
Well,
So we
that
put all this money in.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, what I wanted to say, my thought keeps going to people like Gandhi, for example, and Einstein, and so many of these great leaders of the past who said that, in order to stop war, for example, we need to stop fighting the war within ourselves. And so, for example, that's one of the reasons why I'm a vegan, right? So many philosophers have said that if we stop killing animals, then we will stop killing people. Because the violence towards animals it desensitizes us. Oh, well, I can go and shoot a deer in the forest, or I can just go to the supermarket and buy a hunk of beef, and, and we as humans, we have a violent nature that has taken over this planet. It's scary, Peter.
We should be scared about it. We really should be. We should be scared in the first place for our children, right? We should be scared for our children about both the violence and disruption of climate change, and also the violence and destruction of the wars around the world. Ukraine war being, in a sense, the biggest war that's going on. And our situation, and I think Raj mentioned this also, is something we really should be afraid of, because this war can end our world. I mean, nuclear weapons, again, for the first time in decades, have not only been mentioned, but there are people writing about their use, and leaders posturing about the nuclear weapons they've got, and they could use them. During the so-called Cold War, we found out in retrospect that the work that the peace movement has been doing was in fact life and world saving, because we found several historic incidences during that period where a nuclear war would have happened if it wasn't for some sort of a bit of good fortune and a personal intervention at the last minute. So yes, our belief in war and our support of this war, because if we're not against this war, if we're not working for peace, we're for the war. You can't sit on the fence in a hot war of the nature that's going on in Europe now. You can't do that. You mentioned leaders, Betska. So yeah, I think that's a huge element in not only in the wars going on and erupting, so to speak, but also in the examples that we should be turning to, right? In order to create a environment situation where this war can stop and where we can develop a world at peace, because that always has to be our gain. You know, the great Hopi quote, and there are many of them, you know, this is why we actually come into this world, right? You know, we don't come into this world to hurt each other, right? And to kill each other, right? We come into this world to enjoy each other, to enjoy each other's company, to enjoy each other's cultures, right? All the wonderful things about humanity, you know, which we don't see anymore because of a war. And where the war is going on, those people are suffering every minute of every day. So
Dr.
leaders,
Carter,
I just wanted to say a little. I just want to say a little thing about the leaders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. One of the good things about this war is that those people, those true leaders for peace, are being remembered. But and you mentioned veganism. Now, this goes back a long, long way. When I went to India, I discovered the what we call here Jainism, which in India they call Jainism. And I discovered that this is a way of life, a philosophy, and a religion which goes back thousands of years, right? So what is our true nature? Well, I guess we can choose, right? Do we want to be seen as horrible creatures, you know, that are continually making these horrible weapons to kill each other as fast and as horribly as possible? Or surely we're not. Surely we'll choose the way of Jainism, Buddhism, Supreme Master Ching Hai at the present time today. And there are, you know, I have often got into sort of arguments both in work for peace and also work for the environment, in which people say, well, we can't help it. This is human nature, right? It's too bad, but we're cold wired to fight each other. We're cold wired to damage the planet. Hardwired, rather, I say.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Yeah.
That it is within our nature, and books have been written on both sides, and the proof really is that we are a cooperative species. We're a cooperative animal. We're not a hostile animal that wants to kill each other at first opportunity. We are goaded and pushed into that by the wrong kind of leader.
Exactly.
And we should sort of put them aside, and we should look at our history and find our real leaders. And so important, I think, that you brought that up.
So a while back, we were discussing the head and the heart, and the quote I know from the First Nations people is that the longest distance in the world is between a man's head and his heart. right? And it truly is. I mean, that's what we've been talking about here for all these minutes. And what I would like to suggest is that, going back to that Hopi quote, finding peace within our own soul is our soul's purpose. So what can families do? What can the average person do? Well, I think it really is, let's find peace within our homes first, right? Within our own homes. So let's be vegan. Let's treat our neighbors with love and kindness. Let's not kill any bugs or anything like that. Let's be noble, kind people, and meditate every day and pray for the planet, raise the vibration. To me, that's the biggest solution, is peace needs to start within, and then it'll help the whole planet.
Provided it's linked with what you described there. I was vegetarian off and on for a long time. And then I got more and more involved in climate change science. So I was forced to become vegan. I really didn't have much choice, and that's, of course, as you well know, because of all the methane, a huge amount,
right.
which is emitted constantly by our cattle herds all over the planet, which we are actually all over the planet increasing. But I also realized that veganism actually is a doorway for ourselves and our family into a world of peacefully living together. If we can, and children can do this naturally. It's very interesting. Many children go through a phase in which they don't want to eat any meat anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
And then it seems, they get caught up and they lose it. So, but becoming vegan, right, because of not hurting and torturing and killing other creatures, other animals, other mammals, just like us, right? Yeah, I think that compassion, that sensitivity, which individually we can all develop, is then a doorway through which we can really understand and work for peace, and work for peace every day. What's the most precious thing in life, if you ask anybody? They're actually not going to tell you what it is. The most precious thing in life is peace. Peace. There's nothing more precious in our lives than peace. And that is reflected, as you say, about that great Hopi quote, in a much more eloquent way that says the same thing.
Well, Dr. Carter, I could stay here for the next 2 hours and have a conversation with you. I just found this so fascinating. Raj, any final questions or comments from you? No? It's been great. Yeah? It's been great. So thank you, Dr. Carter.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Betska.
Thank you so much.
It's a wonderful thing
you.
that you're doing here. You're contributing to a peaceful world every day.
Yes, thank you so
much.
Every
hour of every day, I would say.
Every hour of every day.
And so will Rajbi. Goodbye.
Can anybody out there hear me? Hear me?